go. So we'll just give it another few seconds here for folks to come in.
You're just entering, we've invited people to put their geographical location or retreat center or organization they align with in the chat. And then whenever you want to start, you're welcome to, and I'll watch the waiting room. I can admit people.
Okay, great, thank you. I was just thinking it would have been kind of fun to have a poll to see where people were on the spectrum of reopening. Tim's comment earlier as we were kind of checking in saying, oh, I'm going to reopen on Monday or something, like within a few days. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. So there's like a lot of urgency behind some of this conversation, immediate thoughts. But for others, we've been open a long time, and for others, it's still a ways out. And so I'm really glad that we're able to gather and have this meeting of the minds across all this space between us here. Great to see folks coming in still. We have a nice call set up here with several guest voices, some time for Q&A, some time in breakout rooms kind of organized by specific aspects of our centers. So I'm looking forward to keeping it engaging and keeping it moving here. So welcome to this community call. I also wanted to mention just a couple upcoming events, which you've probably gotten an email from me about, but our next community call, we've decided to postpone. So May 11, we're going to push back to the 25th because we have our virtual retreat, May 18 and 19, for this whole community. If you've been on these community calls or you've interacted with our work, you're welcome to join us for that virtual retreat. It's called Flourishing Together. We can put the link in the chat. You're welcome to register for that. 2 days of programming, mostly from us, from people in the steering committee, and bringing folks into conversation and dialogue about what's important to us now. So we hope that you'll join us for that instead of a community call on the 11th. Our topic on the 25th, I think, will be sort of debriefing and checking in on what we pulled out of the Flourishing Together 2-day retreat. But if there are other issues that are pressing, we may pivot a little as well. So we're holding that loosely for the 25th to see what comes up, because there is a lot of churn right now in our sector. So that's where I'm at. Those are my announcements. Not a whole lot there. Justine, did you have more that you wanted to touch on? Okay.
Wonderful. I put the link in the chat.
Cool.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks, Ben, for the updates. This call feels kind of like Groundhog's Day. I remember having conversations about opening and reopening of summer of 2020. Little did we know a year later we'd be having this conversation again. I'm really excited though, because it feels like the time is right. And Francisco, as you walked into this Zoom space, said it feels responsive right now as well. We have a couple of voices joining us today. Tim and Anne and Francisco are all going to share their stages of their retreat centers, and they're at different points. Like many of us, we're all at different stages. If we've met before, you know I'm the associate director at Kirkridge and also support the RCC through community calls. And Kirkridge is really uncertain still where we're headed in the summer into the fall. So I'm especially looking forward to this space as gleaning what people have learned, maybe through trial and error, what were the things that didn't work, what they knew to be true, how they aligned with their mission. We're going to hear 3 almost case studies, and then we're going to break into small groups, which I'll explain after that. So about half the time we'll be listening to other retreat center leaders. I'll introduce them, and then we'll do questions and answers at the end of the 3 spotlights, and then break out into rooms. So I'm excited because we've seen these faces in the community calls, and Ben and I invited them to share their stories. We know you all are carrying stories, so hopefully in the breakout rooms, we'll talk about what questions you have, where you're on your reopening or just opening or pivoting journey, however you want to name it for yourself. And so our 3 speakers, our first is Francisco from Pendle Hill, who I believe was recently hired during the pandemic. to talk about this. And so they'll each share for about 7, 8, 9 minutes. Please populate the chat with the questions. I'll invite then Anne and Tim to speak of their stories in their centers. Francisco, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Well, I thank you for the invitation to talk to you a little bit about our journey in regards to the reopening piece. I have been working at Pendle Hill for the past 4 years, but it is as Justin said, within the COVID year, I transitioned to be the new executive director of the retreat center. I was serving and still serving with a dual hat here as the director of education for Pendle Hill. In March 18, 2020, we made the decision, motivated in part not just because the situation that was going on with COVID in the nation, but also the government of Pennsylvania issued an order that non-essential business should be closed. So for us, that piece of the equation was easy because the decision that we made was following, not just the political decision made by the government, the executive decision made by the governor of Pennsylvania, but also taking into consideration the things that were happening in our county, where we are located in Delaware County in central Pennsylvania. So since that time, I will say that Pendle Hill entered into a multiple transition, a layer of transitions movement that has to do with not just with closing the campus, and all of you know what that means, contacting retreat leaders, contacting groups that use our facility, and so on, but also internally, we engage in several conversations with our staff about the process that we will going to follow, hoping that we were able to maintain as many of them as possible. Well, that was not the case. We couldn't, as time was passing, we realized that it was unsustainable for us to maintain the full staff body, and we practically reinvent ourselves and keep 19, 18 personnel. We distribute many of the tasks, essential tasks, among the people that remain within us, and with the support with the PPP, the programs that the federal government put out, we were able to apply and we gained some support from there. We were able to support the people that were being released from our organization for 3 months, so that people were able to, have some finance resources to support it. The puzzle got complex as we were going. So we went into a transition that forced us to plan all our own retreat, to be transitioning from on campus to online. And within the leadership transition, again, I assume as executive director September 1st, but I was in charge of making possible those transitions to be having a vibrant presence online. By October, I put together the staff and I said, this is the plan that I would like to invite you to accompany me on. Our retreat center was founded during the Depression, so we somehow has in our DNA some lessons of how to behave in time of crisis, especially when resources seems to be very scarce. And my invitation to all of you is to let's try to dream together, and let's try to outline a good plan for us to come out of this crisis when time permits. So I established a reopening committee, and the first things that I asked to this committee was to start looking at the different protocols that we already have in place in regards to maintain a safe environment in our campus. So that allow us to start looking at the different policies that we put in place in the first place, and to inform them with the evolving decision that the CDC and the local health authorities were putting out there. So we try to keep, instead of something written in stone, we try to keep a document that allow us to engage in conversation, thinking about the type of services that we were accustomed to offer, either by welcoming external group into campus or sojourners, or by welcoming our own programs back into campus. That review of protocols and development of protocols, we're thinking that, well, what will happen if we are able to open by the summer? And we know that we didn't open by the summer. What happens if we will be able to open by spring? And I always said to the reopening committee, you have to be thinking that if we are planning to reopen by, let's say, mid-March, that decision has to be made by December 15th. Yeah. Why? Because it is not just a decision on the air, but that decision on its own implies that we will need to rehire some of our personnel. And at the same time, we need to consider the specificity of our campus in order to offer a great environment to our guests. And when I said great environments, the things that come to mind is we count every single room with private bathroom. As many retreat center, most of our rooms has shared bathrooms. So we started looking at our visitors will be demanding us to have access to private bathroom. If this is the case, we just have 19, and we can distribute the other shared bathroom and assign them to key rooms. But again, that put us under certain numbers of people that we can welcome on campus, if that will be the factor that will be guiding our decision. Two main factors has been considered for this reopening scenario. The first one is how the vaccination rate in the country is, and especially around our area. And the second is how is the rate of COVID cases also in our area. And I have been monitoring this very closely in a weekly basis. I go to different centers, especially not just the local health department, but also looking at the CDC in general nationwide, and the data that is collected by Johns Hopkins University in regards to COVID-19. And I think that also Duke University has a marvelous website that track and give you a good sense of where you can be based on the number of cases and the rate of vaccination in your area. So after that, and after working in many of these protocols and many aspects, the reopening committee were looking at what are the people that we need to hire for what and by when, in order to say that we were going to reopen by mid-June, as I was telling the group before, that this is our aim, And I have been holding to that day for a while because I have been monitoring how, again, the vaccination rate is increasing and how the number of cases of COVID in our area was decreasing. Well, this is not true after the spring break. After the spring break, I don't know what happened, what went into people's minds, but the fact is like the number were back as if we were in April 2020 in regards to cases. But we say, well, with the protocols that we have, let's make a scenario that we were only welcome groups of certain sites into our campus. So Pendle Hill has a capacity to welcome around 100 people, again, with a combination of shared room and private room. At this time, we only will welcome groups up to 45, recognizing that most of those people will be in private room and most of them will have access to a private bathroom or a assigned bathroom. We want to play with that for a couple months and see what happens. And after that, the next step will be engaging in conversation with groups that are willing to share rooms, but recognizing that they will need to follow the protocols that we have been developing. And I will be more than happy to share, to send out the protocols as we have it. These are evolving documents that are very guided by the CDC guidelines. The other aspect that I want to mention in this reopening process is like, because the pandemic right now, you can ask openly about vaccination and related questions around that. But we know that HIPAA, this is illegal. If we are not in a pandemic scenario, we will be in trouble if we ask these questions. So recognizing that situation will change overnight at any moment, I reach out to several friends that are lawyers that are also working not just within the retreat, within a retreat center, but serving other organizations and ask them, what are the best practice that they are having around this type of questioning and form? Because if I am having a guest and I am saying, hey, I need to know if you, over the past 2 weeks, you were close to somebody with COVID, did you develop symptoms, whatever. I know that at some point I won't be able, from a legal point of view, to continue asking that. So there is a group of friends in Philadelphia that are getting together every week. They are all of them lawyers that work for different organizations. And when I reach out to them, they say, oh, we won't have any problem about sharing with you the development of the documents that we are reviewing for you to have that available when you are ready to open Pendle Hill. So I am just waiting for that, supposed to be given to me this week. And because we cannot put the horse in front, the car in front of the horse, I know that I cannot wait to open or to have demand from groups or for sojourners in order to hire people. So here I am, acting on faith, and I am putting together out there right now. If you go to Pendle Hill website, we have a series of job openings. These are essential for us to offer a good service, and the hope is that with the conversation that we already have been having for the past, I would say 5 months, with potential clients and with groups that use our campus, and also with our own facilitators, that we will be able to manage in a reopening scenario that we are calling a soft reopening, to welcome people back at certain capacity, recognizing that we will be able to offer, a limit services as they are accustomed to when they were coming to Pendle Hill. For example, in the first groups that will be welcome on campus, the art studio won't be open for them. This is something that people look forward, as we have an art studio that is open to the public when they are here on campus, but we are not ready to open that particular facility there. And at the same time, we are trying to concentrate the use of a single facility as we go, and we are working how to do dining service in a way that prevent or better to say, that maintain certain social distance among the participants and the groups that are coming to campus. This is where we are, again, with the big hope that every single piece of this puzzle will be ready, and that we will open our door to sojourners and to groups by mid-June. We have developed a registration form for this because people will need to register in advance, and we are now inviting people to do as so many people used to, that they show up at Pendle Hill and they say, hey, do you think that I can stay here tonight? And I said, well, let me see if there is room. We are walking away from that, and we are just trying to be as much prepared as we can, with the limitation, again, that we are hiring people as we go, and we are hoping that we will have the essential staff. Right now we are around 19, almost 20, as a letter of offer was made yesterday to somebody, but here where we are, and I will be more than happy to expand in any of these in the Q&A.
Thanks so much, Francisco. I already see a lot of heads nodding, and there's some common questions around HIPAA rules and looking at how to really stay true to a mission, inviting people in, being inclusive, and having access points that you've touched on. So thank you very much. And again, if you have questions about that, like I'm like, shared bathrooms, yes, that's a major concern at Kirkridge. You can populate the chat and we'll hold on to them. But next I want to move on to Anne from Manresa, who has a bit of a different experience about opening, closing, welcoming groups, holding off. Anne, I'll just let you tell your story. Can you unmute your audio? Thanks.
Manresa is a 95-year-old retreat center. In our heyday, like last February, a year ago February, we could accommodate 60 to 65 persons. Beginning of last March, we knew the train was coming, and it was coming hard and fast. And so we formed a COVID committee of 5 of us, and we represented all different aspects of the operation. We had all kinds of differences of opinion at that point in terms of, is this real? Is this not real? But the COVID committee was the one that took on the responsibility of deciding our practices and our policies. We have 4 older Jesuits living on our property. They come into the main house 2-3 times a day. They have offices in the main building, and their main dining room is in our building. So that's a piece of us. We also have a chapel that we have invited the larger community to come in Monday through Friday, and that chapel could hold up to 70 people. So as this started, the COVID committee set out some guidelines about when we would close. And we finished our meeting on a Tuesday, and by Friday, the reality hit and we closed. We were able to retain our staff with the exception of about 3 people. Certainly the government loans helped tremendously carry us through. Some staff took cuts. Probably the hardest hit was our kitchen, which is an outside operation. So they manage their own hours, and a lot of them had their hours severely cut because we just didn't have people. We reopened, so we closed mid-March. We reopened beginning of July for a kids group. So that was our test run. Over the course of summer and going forward, we believe we've had about 800 people come through our doors for retreats, small groups, and a couple of live on-campus classes, because we're both a spirituality center as well as a retreat center. We put most of our programming over to Zoom, and it worked. So we were able to stay in touch, keep in contact, keep the programming side pretty much going as it had been, with the exception of not here, not physically present. No cookies and coffee. So far, we've had one false scare among the Jesuits. One of the Jesuits tested positive for COVID. It turned out to be, I think, a false positive. But because of that, the Jesuits all had to go into quarantine, which meant the morning mass had to stop. A couple of us that ate with that particular Jesuit, we landed up in quarantine, so I was home for a few days till I could get my rapid test. But through it all, most of the people have consistently worked. What we have done, and here's where we get into detail, our environment. We have housekeeping daily, wiping down all doorknobs, doors, main contact points. If a bedroom has been used, it sits empty for 2-3 days before housekeeping goes in to clean, just in case. We've put in UV air exchange handlers, and I'm not sure how that works, but it seems to, in all of our main rooms, our dining room, our main meeting room, our lower level room, as well as our chapel. So there's always, even in the cold of Michigan, when the windows had to be closed, there was air being cleaned and circulating. We had literally 2 6-foot measuring sticks. And the committee went around and we measured our chapel, our dining room, our lounge, put down little pieces of blue tape where people could sit. And that became our guideline. We tried to keep that 6-foot social distancing. We had to close 2 of our smaller direction rooms because they were just too small and we couldn't guarantee good air exchange. Several of the staff, including myself, has like an air cleaner right in each of our offices. So I feel okay meeting folks here in my office, keeping distance, wearing masks. So we've tried to improve our environment to the point that we could. Our dining room, we had been doing buffet service where you walk down 2 sides of a line. We closed that. Instead, we have now set up a cafeteria style with a sneeze guard going down the front side from eyebrow level right down to the top of the counter, so that only the kitchen staff handles the serving utensils. So I walk down the line, I'd like this, I'd like that. They prepare my plate, hand it to me at the end. In our dining room, the expectation is you wear a mask unless you're eating. So if you're waiting in line, you wear a mask. And this is a pretty constant theme. We expect people to wear masks in this building and to wear them appropriately. Early on, one woman came in with this little lacy thing, and it's like, that doesn't count. It needs to be a mask covering your nose, covering your mouth. And this past weekend, we had a retreat group, and I guess several of the guys thought that was crazy. And they were basically said, you either need to wear your mask or you need to go home. So we're pretty firm on keeping people in mask and safe that way. The dining room is also deep cleaned after each meal. I mean, it closes like for 45 minutes, deep cleaning. We went to desserts and snacks and things like that, pre-wrapped. So again, trying to cut down people fingering anything. Our retreatants, we limit to 22 because that's what we can do. They are sent emails in advance so they know the protocol, what we expect, and we believe they're coming to our house, and we have the right and the responsibility to set the guidelines, and we're pretty non-negotiable on those. They wear a mask, no exceptions. When they come in, and this is for classes, for retreats, for anything, even a visitor, on the front table, there's what we call our COVID form. It has 3 basic questions. They check off, they sign, and the questions include, I feel fine, I've not been traveling, I promise if I start to feel ill, I will contact the house. So even the 8 o'clock mass people that are still coming every morning has their name checked off that they're here so that we can trace if we need to. We can do that kind of follow-up. When they come in after signing this form, they take their temperature. And then each morning, as they enter the dining room, they're asked to take their temperature again. So it's kind of that kind of monitoring. So we're watching for fevers. No one is absolutely doing the police work. We're hoping people will behave like adults. And for the most part, they do. We have said that in all of our places, you get your seat and you stay in your seat. So like you have your chair in the dining room, the chapel, the lounge, our main meeting space. And that is your chair for your duration. So again, we're trying to limit people getting in contact with each other. We've made extensive use of Zoom. What a godsend that has turned out to be. We've kept in touch. We've offered a lot of classes. One of our challenges, though, is that in the past, we had a lot of student groups, Kairos groups, which is like a senior year retreat, 4 or 5 day retreat. And because schools are, in Michigan especially, are just so volatile, we frequently cancel. We find cancellations at the last minute, or we plan on bringing 30, and now parents have said no, and here are 19. So unfortunately, we've had a lot of eggs cracked that we didn't get a chance to use. Now we just order the food, we think they're coming, and then due to circumstances outside our control, that they just don't materialize. I think what we've learned mostly is that it's our house and we set the guidelines, and you don't, and this sounds so harsh, you don't have to come if you can't abide by our guidelines, because we're here to keep everybody from the oldest Jesuit to the youngest student safe and healthy. And of the 800, we've had no feedback, no reports that anyone has caught COVID while here on this property. So we feel really good about that. The COVID committee has done its work. We're good for crisis, but we're also good for longer range strategies. And I think that's really helped. So that Jesuit that landed up having the false positive, we had to cancel a retreat midway through because all the Jesuits had to go into immediate quarantine. So we could say, this is the way it is. We apologize sincerely, but to keep you safe and healthy, we're going to ask you to leave now. I think we've counted on a blend of imagination and prudence. And sometimes that can be really hard. Some of us are more fearful, I would use that word. And I put my own self in that group. For the longest time, I was living with someone who had stage 4 lung cancer. Well, my limit for catching COVID was off the chart. Somebody else's was a bit different, but we could talk it through and work it through. And lastly, we did follow very closely, and we continue to follow the guidelines as issued by the CDC, by the state of Michigan, and our own archdiocese. So the church has said, take the paper out, no worship aids left in pews, get rid of the holy water. So we're getting the input and then saying what helps us. So we're open. We are, I think we're thriving. Most of our staff, 85% of our staff has had one or more of the vaccines. So we're breathing a little easier there. We're not making it mandatory. We can't. Legally, we cannot. We're hoping that the other 15% decides the wisdom of getting that vaccine. But all we can do meanwhile is make sure we keep people safe. So we opened, we did soft closings, but for the most part, we've been open since July, and it's been working out. Now watch somebody come through with COVID today and we have to close, but for right now, that we're okay. We're doing all right.
And we'll all knock on wood for you that doesn't.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I love the detail of that, like the micro level and how simply you put it, this is our house. And I think a part of hospitality is inviting people to respect the house rules. So thank you so much. Francisco talked about it, and then I believe Ken also put a resource in the chat. At the end, Ben or I, please remind us, will invite you to a conversation offline in Mighty Networks where we can be sharing resources, ideas, tips, tricks, all of that. If one of us doesn't mention it, please remind us, because this is a beautiful conversation already that we'd love to continue, as many retreat centers are in different stages. And with that, a different stage from Spirit Center. Tim, I'll let you take it away to share your experiences.
Thank you. The other thing is just the reality, even in these sharings so far, is how different the different retreat centers are in terms of our situations, even starting out. So Spirit Center is a ministry of the Monastery of St. Gertrude. We're located in Cottonwood, Idaho, where the main monastery houses approximately 25 religious women. The Spirit Center, the retreat house, is literally across the driveway on the grounds of the monastery. A little bit about kind of where we're located. We are definitely in rural Idaho. We are 3 hours from Spokane and 4 hours from Boise. Idaho County, where we're located, has the same square acreage or whatever of the state of Massachusetts, and there's one stoplight in the entire county. So to kind of put it in perspective where we are compared to, an urban retreat center, for example, we are the other end of the spectrum. Spirit Center itself has been in operation for about 15 years. We have 22 rooms in our main building with a total of 32 beds. So most of the rooms have 2 twin beds, some have 1 full-size bed. Each of the rooms has a private bath, which is one of the key factors. We also have on the property, we operate kind of a converted farmhouse that has 14 beds squished into this farmhouse. And that's kind of a factor in how we do things, because it's nothing like having separate rooms over here at the main building. Additionally, we have a large conference room and a small conference room. We have our guest rooms are on 3 floors, and at the end of each floor, there's a small lounge with a kitchenette that's shared by the guests. We have a prayer room, an art room, and a library that are all group use here in the building. But we do not have our own dining facilities, and the chapel also is over at the main monastery. So as configured, the Spirit Center and what we offer here as a retreat ministry is intentionally, or was intentionally, an extension of the monastery and an expression of the monastery and the religious community's offering of hospitality. So our dining room is the same dining room that the sisters use. There isn't a separate dining room. So that is definitely an important thing for us to consider as we go forward. But it also, being associated with the monastery has been helpful. Before we all got on, I mentioned that we have staffing issues here, but nothing like other retreat centers because, and I realize that as everyone's been sharing, in terms of staff, like the housekeeping staff comes from the monastery, the kitchen staff comes from the monastery, the maintenance staff comes from the monastery. So we pay for their services when they come and work for us, that sort of thing. But we didn't have to, from our staff, we didn't have to let any one of those people go. And the day-to-day operations of the monastery didn't change because of COVID, even though it did here at Spirit Center. So, and then in terms of the types of retreats that we offer our own like programmed retreats. We host groups here, so they come and use our facilities, and then we have individuals who come on retreats. So those are the three different kind of guests we have here at Spirit Center. So regarding COVID, the experience here has been, the same as everyone else has had, but of course, very nuanced also. We closed in March, again, because was dictated by state and local governments. We closed before there was a positive test here in Idaho County. So no one had tested positive here in this county at the time that we closed. But we've consistently said we're going to follow the state and local guidelines, the guidelines of the CDC as well, as we continue to operate. So we did try a soft reopening in August and September, limited to individual retreatants only. There was no access to the monastery. And the guests that we had here, we had them separated by floors. So basically we could have 3 people here at a time. Not exactly financially feasible, but at the same time, a way to start seeing what is possible and what isn't, and trying to be very responsive to people who expressed a need to come here. So we tried to be sensitive to those things as well. We learned a lot from that because with everything closed, we were bringing, like I said, it's just across the driveway, but it's still bringing 3 meals a day over to serve to the guests, having to bring the trays and everything back across the driveway to the dining room. That included some guests who were here on a weekend. And if nothing else, we learned that was logistically unsustainable in a long-term reopening. And we were also realizing that the experience, both for the guests and for us, was really lacking. We were essentially a hotel, and that's the ministry component of what we do here was completely lost in that experience. And so we're really dealing with some very conflicted emotions of trying to offer hospitality while at the same time saying no, 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 so really wrestled with that. And then in September, one of the sisters tested positive for COVID, and subsequently a handful of the community tested positive. So we shut everything down at that point. Very providentially, the monastery had already scheduled and was well on the way to do a major renovation of the sisters' residence. Pretty much all the money had been raised. It was already scheduled, the contract, all that. So even if it weren't for COVID, Spirit Center was going to be closed from October to April because of the renovation, as the sisters came over and lived here at Spirit Center. So COVID or no, we were closed from October to April. The good thing, or the interesting thing that then presented, we didn't have to kind of be going back and forth during that time frame, but it also gave us a clear timeline to be considering, will we reopen at this date or not? we already had groups and retreats on the schedule, at the conclusion of the remodel, and we didn't cancel those off. We kind of said, hey, we're keeping you on the schedule, but who knows? So then we came to the point of, okay, the remodeling is actually on schedule, which was, surprise number one. And then had to start figuring out, okay, are we going to reopen or not? We started with the question of like concern for the other, so the concern for the sisters, concern for the guests, concern for the employees, and the concern for the local community. Like I said, we are very rural, so the majority of guests who come here to Spirit Center are coming from somewhere else, from a big city like Boise or Spokane, Seattle. I mean, anywhere in the regional, Northwest, we have guests from all over the country at times. So realizing that our responsibility included, are we bringing something here that would be a risk to the local community that otherwise wouldn't be the case? Knowing that here in Idaho County, mask wearing is the exception rather than the norm. So I mean, it's knowing the reality of where we are and having to be sensitive to that and responsible for those realities. Because the other half of that, of course, is the fact that people coming here and have the expectation of a community that's, the local community that's behaving the same way that they're seeing at home, and they're not going to experience that in the local community here. So trying to be very sensitive to those sorts of things and at least thinking those through. Additionally, we had to think about like, is it realistic to offer hospitality in a way that's meaningful, in a way that, again, isn't just a hotel sort of situation? Or to put it differently, to make sure that we are offering a ministry and not purely, a revenue generating activity again, which would probably be questionable anyway. So to really explore, do we have something to offer right now? And really it came down to the conversation of should we, not can we, should we be reopening? And we kind of went back and forth on that a bit. Ultimately, again, because of that relationship, the decision-making process came down to the monastery deciding to reopen. The team here is basically, there's two of us who are here full-time. After COVID hit, the director of Spirit Center resigned. And so I'm actually an interim manager here. So on top of everything else. So there's some of those sorts of components. So we do have some of those bigger, longer term staffing issues, but not the day-to-day in the same way that some of the other groups we're talking about already. The key, non-negotiable in the reopening was, will the monastery be open or not? If the monastery isn't open, then we won't be able to offer a meaningful experience and an experience that people are used to. Realizing that, as one of the sisters says, normal has left the station. We're not going to be able to go back to normal, but we need to be able to meet people where they are and give them a meaningful experience. We needed the monastery to be open so that people could come here to worship and share in the prayer life. And like I mentioned before, to have an experience of being able to eat food. And kind of how we wrestled with that was understanding that there's an implication that what we're of safety that we can't guarantee. So we really wrestled with that and how to do that. Some of the things that we've done, one, all the sisters have been vaccinated. So from the religious community perspective, that gave the prioress a level of comfort to explore the possibility of reopening. In terms of the dining room, like Anne mentioned, what had previously been buffet style is now going to be cafeteria style, so that people aren't touching the same serving items, so that those who are doing the serving, and this is an interesting component, the sisters will actually be working the serving line. They'll be wearing masks. They'll be wearing gloves, but it's an opportunity for interaction with the guests to offer hospitality when they still won't be able to sit down with the guests at meals because we still need to do the social distancing. Same thing in chapel. So we will assign people to seats in chapel if they want to join the Sisters for Prayer, just in the same way that we'll assign them to a room here when they come to Spirit Center. So again, like Ann said, they'll be sitting in the same spot every time. They'll be touching the same books every time. There won't be kind of the cross-pollination of shared items. Like Francisco was mentioning, there is the issue of not being able to require vaccines, knowing that some of our guests would not appreciate us even asking. Additionally, it kind of became moot one way or the other because the governor of the state of Idaho issued an executive order banning vaccine passports. So here in Idaho, you cannot ask or require vaccination. What that meant for us is that we will automatically assume that at least some percentage of our guests will not be vaccinated, and our protocols and guidelines are going to operate under that understanding. So from that perspective, then it kind of made it easier for us to put that out there instead of having to deal with people say, well, I'm vaccinated, so I'm good. We're able to kind of put that as the working to the lowest common denominator, basically. So we have put together 2 documents. I actually put these out on the shared drive already, of kind of the protocols. We have a protocol sheet of what we ask of our visitors, what the monastery will do, and what here at Spirit Center will do in order to reopen, because as was mentioned before, we are actually opening on Monday. We'll have a group of 22, or actually I guess now it's 19 coming that will be arriving here on Monday. One thing that I didn't mention, but part of that reopening is because we already had those groups on the schedule, these were the first month and a half of groups and retreats on our schedule are all known groups. So groups that have come here before that we have a relationship with already, and are able to work with, rather than having build a cold relationship on top of everything else. So we've been able to partner very well with the groups that are already coming, and almost flesh these protocols out with them. So the key things, we're asking everyone to wear a mask, maintain 6 feet of distance. We're going to configure our conference room accordingly. I bought a bunch of small TV tables instead of our regular big round tables for sharing, so that the room could be very flexible and we can maintain distancing. The sisters, even though they've all been vaccinated, have agreed that they will wear masks and remain physically distanced from our guests, even ones that they have years and decades of relationship with. Here at Spirit Center specifically, we're going to go to single occupancy rooms. So unless you live at the same physical address, you can't share a room coming for a retreat. So all of our retreats, all of our individual will be in separate rooms, separate bathroom. So additionally, like I mentioned before, we have 3 floors. So our ground floor, we're going to reserve only for individual retreatants so that they won't have to worry about interacting with a group coming from somewhere else, so that they'll be kind of separated out, won't have to worry about a group dynamic. Also, we're only going to welcome 1 group at a time so that we don't have, for example, a group from Spokane and a group from Boise coming in down here, and again, cross-pollinating and bringing from one place or the other. Like I mentioned before, we'll have cafeteria style meals and on a schedule that's offset from when the sisters and the employees are eating, so that we'll reduce the amount of people in the dining room at the same time. One last thing, it was kind of an interesting, we wrestled with this anyway, but in the past, we've actually, as an interesting aspect of hospitality to the next guest, we would have our guests strip their bed and remake it for the next guest. No more of that. So strip the bed, leave it, the housekeeping staff will come and make the beds. And like Ann, I think, mentioned before, we are also going to make sure that at least 24 hours will pass between when someone is in a room and then the next person is assigned to it, so that the room has time to breathe. Same thing for the groups. Of course, our housekeepers are thrilled because that reduces the workload on them a bit. So we won't have any quick turnaround issues. The other thing that we put together is what we're calling kind of an expectations agreement. We realized, and we didn't want to have overly legal terminology. Again, we wanted it to be a matter of hospitality, but still make sure that people understood what we are expecting of them in coming here. So, and basically just flat out acknowledging the monastery and spirit center can't guarantee their safety, and that they will be around people who may be unvaccinated or asymptomatic, and that they're freely choosing to come here. So we basically put together a document asking them to initial and then sign, saying they understand the situation, they're choosing to come here, they are not sick and haven't been exposed to anyone in the last 14 days. They'll abide by our protocols while they're here. And if they are starting to feel ill within 14 days after leaving, they agree to receive a COVID test and then let us know if they test positive, for the sake of contact tracing. So that's kind of the rundown on what we're doing. Like I said, and it all starts on Monday, so pray for us.
Thanks, Tim. We'll be definitely thinking of you and all of the staff and guests in that space. And I love that continuous thread of really ensuring or attempting to ensure safety for not only your staff, but the guests and the local communities. I think an important thread as retreat centers hold this space. We have about 10 minutes for questions, and we invite you to just unmute your audio and ask the question. If it's for anyone or the three of them or a specific person, please let us know. Yolanda.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you all again. I've been absent for a little while, but I'm back, and I'm back with questions per usual. My question is for Tim and for Anne. I know that Tim touched base a little bit on the different protocols and the contract tracing, and I was thinking about maybe if Anne could help me understand, just as I think about planning ahead. Right now, we're closed as a retreat center. We don't have retreat rooms available. So we're not doing any of that. What we are doing is offering our programming through Zoom. But I just want to learn from Anne. I know that the main goal is to prevent and to avoid anybody being tested positive for COVID. But in the case that someone does, how are you guys ready and to handle a situation? Would that mean that the program participants will all be notified? If you know, will that mean that the center will shut down? Does that mean that certain individuals that were in contact would quarantine and then others will remain on campus? What does that look like? And the reason I ask is because you know how word of mouth, how quickly word of mouth travels, and nobody wants to be the person that has the retreat center where someone tested, because it's going to spread like rapid fire. So I am just curious, and what steps you guys have prepared to do. And the only reason I'm directing this to Anne is because it seems like you guys been doing this for a while. So I'm just curious to know.
I think our first guideline is transparency. So if someone becomes, like during that morning fever check, temperature check, if someone becomes ill, it's not a stigma, that please tell us the truth. If not, since we're mostly localized, people that come here, we're in a metro area, They have a choice of either quarantining in their room until they can be picked up, or they leave. We would then immediately tell the other members, respecting HIPAA and privacy, that we've had someone who we believe has become ill. You need to know this. If the retreat has already ended and folks have gone home, we keep meticulous lists about who is here. Like one of the classes that we're now offering in person is every other Monday, there's a little book study on one of the books. As people come in, they have to initial that they've been here. If someone reported illness, I could immediately contact every single person who came in that day for class. Or if it's the 8 o'clock mass group, we know that they've signed in because a staff member has watched them do that. I mean, it's subtle policing, but I think it's really important. So no, we would believe in transparency. We need to tell the truth to our community as a way of keeping that ripple effect from going further and further and further. So like when the one Jesuit had the positive, our executive director went into the middle of that retreat and said, one of the Jesuits, you've not had contact with the person, but you need to know that your retreat director had breakfast with this person 3 hours ago. And some of the guys said, let's stay for one more conference. And some of the guys said, I'm going home now. But it was really important for us to tell the truth. Hopefully our credibility gets improved rather than diminished by telling truth. So that's what we promise.
And thank you, Anne. I appreciate that. I just know we're talking about all the protocols to prevent it, but what do we do once someone has been, tested? So thank you.
I would add to that. We've been having people back in house since July. We closed down in December, opened back up in February when the rates went back down. One of the things that we do is those sheets that they sign in on get clipped together, and those sheets have their emergency contacts. So that just goes in my tracing folder, and those are maintained. So anybody on that retreat that says something to me afterwards, I could pull that whole packet and call everybody on their contacts. We also have shared bathrooms, so we've been fortunate not to have anybody get ill yet, but our plan is, as Anne said, for somebody who is ill to go home immediately. We would close down that room. We would also close down the shared bathroom that had the stall that they were using, so that could be cleaned. And then the people who are also sharing that bathroom would have more information than everybody else in terms of being reallocated to another bathroom. But those are just pieces that we've put in place too in a as if world.
And I would add that as a staff person, every morning when I come into the building, I'm asked to sign in and take my temperature, so that if one of the staff members became ill, they would know who had contact with that person. I think we're past the point of saying we would close the whole retreat house. Okay, at one point we thought we would have to. If someone became ill, we have to close down. I think we're past that. I think it's much more now, can we figure out how to contain that person who sat near, to make sure that we give the appropriate information. So.
And this is Nancy at Cabrini Retreat Center. And if those of you that are open and have had this experience don't want to share that, that's fine. But we're still kind of struggling with the reopen, hoping to do that in early July. If or when those of you that have had the experience of having to tell people and let them know that the retreat or the program is going to end, what do you do in terms of the financial arrangements? Do you refund? How do you handle that? And if you're not comfortable sharing that, that's fine. But I know that's something people are asking. If we get sent home, what happens?
Manresa, I think following the long Jesuit tradition, most of our retreats are donation-based. So we don't necessarily have to do refunds. But if someone has pre-registered for a retreat that has a donation and we feel for whatever reason we need to cancel, of course we return the money. Our business manager's written several refund checks over the months. I think one of the times it became most apparent is we had 2 directors coming in to do an inner healing retreat. One of the directors was exposed to COVID via her daughter the day before. She didn't feel comfortable coming, for which we were grateful. Her partner didn't feel comfortable proceeding without her, so we had to cancel that retreat. And of course, we gave refunds because that was a deposit situation. So did the retreatants ever get the full story? No. All they knew is that one of the presenters wasn't feeling well, and in best interest, we're canceling the retreat and returning your funds.
Sounds like you've done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also offer transfer coupons.
Hmm.
So that we would offer them the refund or a transfer coupon for that amount for a retreat later on, and we put, you know, a date on the coupon for, you know, like a year later, or maybe a little bit more than a year later. So if they come in a particular time of the year, it allows them to come the same time next year, type thing. And often people take advantage of that too.
Mm-hmm.
We've kind of run the whole gamut here at Spirit Center. At the first closing, we issued refunds, of course, and prior to that point, we had let people pay, you know, like the full amount for the retreat, the suggested donation amount, when they registered, you know, potentially months in advance. So we were writing some pretty big checks. And then when we did our soft reopening, we were taking reservations, but we weren't taking any payment. So no payment, no deposit, with the understanding that if you're not feeling well, don't come, don't worry about, you know, so that you don't even have $25 that's making you feel like you've got to come because you've already spent the, you know, some money. And now as we get ready to reopen, we are only accepting the deposit. So we aren't letting people pay for the full amount in advance. And what we experienced was during that first, you know, major closing, people were across the map. Some said, well, just keep it. Some said, roll it over. So we kind of had, again, it depended on our relationship with the guest, you know, past history and whatnot as well. But that's kind of what our experience has been here.
I see there's a couple responses too in the chat. Francisco writes, ready to propose a reschedule. Michael has 10% as a contribution. Kirkridge does something similar to what Tim described. And if I recall, Whidbey Institute envelope that said you could also give this as a donation to secure the sustainability of the retreat center. So there are many options out there. I think, yeah. And do you have one more response?
One more comment would be, since we are limiting our retreats to 22, and in prior years, it could range anywhere between 45 to 60. We've run into situations where if your retreat has been canceled, like that inner healing retreat, we offer you first option for the following similar retreat. And that seems to have worked out well for us. We've also had to say to some folks who were used to coming to 2 or 3 retreats a year, one, you get one this cycle because there are so few people that we can accommodate. So again, we're kind of making that up as we go.
Paul?
Just say, we've been open since last June. I just looked it up. We've had 1,700 people come through with no COVID cases, and we followed up with every one of our groups. The other thing we had to do is, because we're making people use single beds, some of those retreats, those people cannot afford them. So we adjusted the price to what it would be normally with a double bedroom. to a single bedroom for some of those groups to help them to be able to accommodate. And we've had a number of groups that are larger that were like, no, we think we're going to postpone for another year. And so we just rolled their deposits the following year, and that with not much issue. And we're up to, at this point, we can actually house 60 at our place. That we've been up to 60 people is our max.
I do have one other question. And
Yolanda?
it just kind of came to me. Justine, is it too late for me to jump in here?
It's not, because you're a delight and I love your questions. And I think we have a smaller group, and we'd only have about 10 minutes in breakout rooms. If everyone's okay, can we stay in this large group and ask questions? If you had questions in those small groups, they were going to be focused on niche retreat centers, large ones that are part of larger networks, or smaller with small staff shared bathrooms. But I think these questions are really fruitful for everyone. So Yolanda, go ahead and ask that question. And I'm just going to thank Arlene and Michael. We're going to hold those breakout groups. So thank you for showing up and volunteering. Go ahead, Yolanda.
I don't know who to direct this question to. I want to say this might be a Ben question or a Justine question. I have obviously been absent for the last couple of weeks, and it's been some staffing and all sorts of different things that have happened at the Dominican Center. But I remember Tim saying something about, oh, well, the staff is really happy. They don't have to change out as many beds and as many things. And I know that Anne mentioned at the beginning something about that they were able to keep a great majority of their staff and lost a few here and there. I know this is maybe unrelated to today's topic, Ben, but I'm wondering if we've had a meeting regarding workload management for, staffing, and how supervisors or directors are looking at what that work management or what that workload means for their employees. I think I'm just, asking for a friend, I guess.
I would say we wanted to talk about a topic very similar to that, teams and managing teams, as one of our breakout rooms in a call maybe two and a half months ago. And there wasn't a lot of interest there. Our needs were elsewhere for that call, and so we didn't end up focusing on it as much. I think some centers have been able to navigate quite smoothly, and I think other centers had to almost shut down completely and lost all their staff, and then they had to rehire as if they had never been open in the first place. So I think there's quite a range there, and I agree in what you're saying about that. It would be great to talk about workload and healing the healer for people who are in those roles trying to hold that kind of space, and yet they're completely overrun with the tasks that have piled up. That is going to be one of our sessions in the virtual retreat, May 18 and 19. We're going to do a session on inner resilience, which I think is related as well to what you're talking about. If folks can put a +1 in the chat or something, I'd be curious to see if there's enough energy there that we could have a whole community call on that as well.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Janine here from the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. I'm curious, I don't know if this is just a California problem, but getting staff to come back or hiring our hourly staff that we lost because of unemployment, we're finding there's a pricing or an hourly wage issue, and we're all small nonprofits. That said, also, just thinking about COVID protocols and the additional work on existing staff, what are some challenges or even successes people have had? I know we're about to enter into that. We're looking at maybe reopening later this year. We financially plan not to reopen at all this year. So, we're sort of just reacting or responding to how California is now in the, orange tier, maybe in the yellow. But one thing we're starting to see is our staff that were like family, they're either taking, rightly so, taking unemployment. We're not paying enough. Our past hourly wages doesn't work for them anymore. And also the vaccine thing of like, do they have to be vaccinated if they don't want to be vaccinated? And then finally, because we cater to social movement groups, there's a cultural aspect with BIPOC communities. So, we're holding that tension. Anyways, I'm just curious to hear other people's, if you have challenges as well of how to attract staff to come back, especially hourly staff in housekeeping and kitchen and grounds work.
I can jump into this and share what I am going through, because at this moment I have several positions open, and we have search committee. We do hiring in a different way. We don't have a firm or a human resources department that does the hiring, but we establish search committee for each position where other staff are involved on those committees as we go. So we have several positions, and what we have learned is that many people are unemployed. It is true, but not necessarily many people are looking for jobs. Yeah, this is a hard fact, because you will believe that with the positions that we have open now, I was afraid that we would have a list of applicants that we won't be able to manage, and this is not the case. It's very manageable, the numbers so far. This is one thing. You mentioned a key element that I think is important for all of us, as many nonprofits are, and is how do we adjust our wage in this critical environment? The decision that I put forward in front of my board was like, look, I don't know if the federal wage will be, the mandatory will be X amount of dollar. I think that we have to work, again, it's a leap of faith here, and see how we can accommodate this. But we made the decision that the minimum wage for this year work was going to be, a $15 an hour, period. And we will accommodate everything after that. So right now, all the positions that I am looking depart from that minimum. Yeah, that put a lot of pressure on me as I need to figure out the finance around this. But on the other hand, I think it's the right thing to do, in order to attract BIPOC and so on. So my hope is, and search committee we have 4 search committee going on as I speak right now, for positions that are, housekeepers. We are eager to get a gardener, and we haven't had, one applicant for gardener, and you will say, what? But yeah, this is the reality. I don't know if it is the time of the year that that many farms are in a full employment or what, but we are having some difficulties to recruit for several positions, and the accommodation around wage, we decided to do our internal work in order to be in a much better place when we are inviting people to join us in the near future.
Thank you, Francisco.
Hi, just a quick response. So we're having trouble rehiring because our business right now is so inconsistent. Even before COVID, it was difficult to keep part-time and per diem staff in the kitchen and housekeeping. And at our recent board meeting, a couple of our board members suggested that I reach out to the hospital that's literally a couple blocks down the street and see if any of the part-time employees there would be looking to pick up extra hours and have it be a pool situation and have them be actually per diem, which we've always, even our per diem paid employees have been employees of Genesis. So that was new. And then we have a university, a state university about 5 miles away, same thing with their dining services. When this idea came up, I was very skeptical, but I've reached out to the directors of both of the dining services and both of them have been affirming. So we haven't actually put it into practice yet, but I mean, I don't know if you're looking to hire full-time people or part-time, but especially for this intermittent staffing, that was a new idea about collaboration on staffing that would have never occurred to me. So for what it's worth.
Any other questions?
I think I have the shared drive, but I just wanted to make sure that it hasn't, because I found a link from like last year. And so it says collaborative or let's see. Where is it? RCC Community Response to COVID-19. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yes.
Mary, that looks right.
Okay. Okay, great.
So
Thanks.
within that larger folder, you'll see a folder about resilience, a folder about our community response, some other, actually I'm in the wrong. Yeah, you'll see a couple specific community calls about COVID, financial resources, sample policies and procedures, and then a few other resources that people have contributed to say, this is what we've done and you're welcome to, modify it for your own use.
Okay, yeah, because I know Tim said that he had put some.
That's in the
sample
policies and
policy
procedures. Yep, and you'll see Spirit
Okay.
Center. I think there's 2 documents there.
Correct.
Great. Okay.
Arlene, who's on
Perfect,
the call,
thanks.
also shared with us the Hilton model for the room cleaning protocol,
Yeah.
and Lindenwood adjusted those. So yeah, there's several different things in there.
Great. And will this recording be put up here?
This recording will go on our blog, and it will go on our Mighty Network, and it will go on our YouTube. I typically don't put the videos here because they fill up a lot of
Oh,
space.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
But
Okay,
the notes,
great.
the notes will be accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for my staff to hear these stories. I think honestly, hearing the stories just helps rather than being all this fictitious, stuff going on in your head. So, that's really helpful.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question. I heard Ann talking about the fact that they have hosted some Kairos retreats, and I didn't want to take time now, but are there other people that maybe I could reach out to personally that are hosting youth groups? Because that's our primary focus. So Paul, all right, thank you. Paul, I know you. I'll talk to you soon.
I wanted to add something on the transparency piece that Anne mentioned, because for me, as we are getting ready to open our retreat center, that transparency has been internal. A great piece of the deal has been to maintain every single staff engaged in the process of redefining the reopening scenario. And that has been very fruitful because they can come directly to me, for example, as the executive director, and pose any question. And they have received as many answers, as they are available. And people really feel that they are part of something that is going on, that they really, the retreat center is not me again, and we are in the same neighborhood as we are celebrating the R90 this year. But it is a joy to feel that your employees, your colleagues are so invested into the process because they feel properly informed. It doesn't matter how hard or how joyful the truth is, but they are part of the network that is holding the container and creating the different scenario as we go.
Thanks, Francisco. I think that's a beautiful place to close out the call, rooted in community and trust. And I also appreciate the transparency of the people who have shared in this space, the questions asked and the lived experiences. So just a moment of gratitude for Michael and Arlene, who are in the steering committee, who were going to hold breakout rooms. Thank you for that. Thank you to everyone who asked a question, responded, was fully engaged. And a special thank you to Francisco, Tim, and Anne for sharing from large picture scenario planning to the details of that space. I'm hopeful we can continue these conversations. Nancy, thank you for asking that question and people raising their hands. You are hopefully connecting with each other off of these community calls. And I sent a link to the Mighty Networks Hub for that conversation to happen, but also please email each other. And Ben and I would love to hear how those conversations go as holders of this space. Ben, do you have a final word?
I will just say that I received a couple emails right before the call started of people saying, oh, I can't make it. I hope you'll record it. So just know that what we've shared here is also going to ripple outward into the larger community. And I'm very grateful for that. I do have a reflection poll here. So let's take a moment to fill out how this call went for you. Make sure that's showing up for you there. Yes. So that we can keep improving our calls and make sure that we're getting what you need.
And as you complete that, a reminder, we will not, we are postponing our first May community call, and we invite you to the retreat on May 18th and 19th. We'll send that link a couple more times just to make sure you get it. And hopefully that's when we'll see you on May 18th. That would be a delight to see all of you there.
Cool. Thank you, everyone, for voting on the poll. I'm super excited about Flourishing Together, our 2-day retreat, and excited to continue these conversations there. When you say that that's the next time we're going to talk, I'm like, oh, I'm excited now. So yes, looking forward to that. Thank you, everyone, for being on the call today. And we'll catch up in a few weeks.